This is a recording of a lecture by Judge David Ambler entitled Lessons from the Crossroads of History. What can our colonial past teach the Baptist churches of New Zealand today? It was presented on Friday the 6th of November 2015 in Tauranga, New Zealand at the Baptist Research Sutherland Lecture as part of the annual Baptist Assembly. Baptist Research is a group that aims to resource New Zealand Baptist churches for mission by stimulating and promoting research into Baptist life, thought and history. Find out more at baptistresearch.org.nz.
Hoi no tuatahi a ke mātu mihi kawana ke koutou o te kāinga nei, o te marae nei ngai tamara awaho, e te matua tā tātou kai kōrero, tēnā koe tēnā koutou o te kāinga nei, me ngā mihi kia koutou kei muri, ngā ringa wera, ngā mihi mahana kia koutou mō ngā kai e hora nei. Nō reira kāre tōroa ngā mihi, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. So just brief acknowledgements to the home kāinga, the home people, and especially for the kai that we've had. Now, I asked for a lectern, and you Baptists. So I've got my watch there because I know a good sermon comes in under half an hour. So I'm going to try and stick to that if I can, and someone will start throwing things if I'm going over time. But with those light comments to one side, what I'm going to talk to you about is a pretty serious part of our history, and I'll get stuck into it, but essentially I'm going to be talking to you about in three particular parts. Firstly, I'm going to talk to you about Aotearoa, which was a British attack during the Waikato Wars. I'm going to then talk to you about, I'm just looking at my notes, the early Māori faith journey, some comments on that, and then I'm going to pick up on a few lessons for Baptist churches today. Nō reira me tīmata. Late on the evening of Saturday, 20 February 1864, over 1,200 lightly provisioned British troops and cavalry assembled in their camp at Aotearoa on the banks of the Waipa River and began a swift single-file march to Aotearoa, some 15 to 20 miles to the southeast. Their mission was to stealthily circuit the fighting Pātarangi just north of Te Awamutu and capture the village of Aotearoa. Kingitanga forces had constructed Pātarangi as part of a formidable defensive line to encounter and blockade the advancing British forces. The success of the mission to Aotearoa depended on the skills of two half-caste Māori guides, James Edwards, also known as Aotearoa Edwiti, and John Gage. They were tasked with guiding the troops through the backcountry to Aotearoa, thereby avoiding any Māori sentries. The troops themselves needed to maintain complete silence and use the cover of the overcast night to remain unseen. Many of these troops had seen action in the Waikato campaign from its beginning when the British forces crossed the Mangatawhiti stream and invaded the Waikato district on 12 July 1863. There had been a handful of battles with Kingitanga forces over the winter and spring of 1863 and into the following summer. The most famous being Rangiriri in late November 1863, as the 10,000 or so troops snaked along the Waikato River and then the Waipa River. Te Rore was the effective navigable limit for British gunboats on the Waipa. The Rangiaowhia district lay just north of what became known as the King's Country or King Country, and was known to Māori as Te Nehe Nui, the Great Forest. The village of Rangiaowhia was an unfortified Māori agricultural village. Before the murmurings of war in the early 1860s, it had been the centre of a hugely successful Māori agricultural enterprise. In many respects, it symbolised the pinnacle of joint Māori missionary efforts during the heyday of Māori agriculture. By 1850, Rangiaowhia was well stocked with farming equipment. At its peak, thousands of acres of wheat, oats, potatoes and other crops were grown to supply Auckland and overseas markets. And writing in the 1850s, the Lady Martin, the wife of the first Chief Justice of New Zealand, painted the following idyllic scene through her colonial lens. Our eyes were gladdened on all sides by sights of peaceful industry. For miles we saw one great wheat field. The blade was just sowing of a vivid green, and all along the way on either side were wild peach trees in full blossom. Carts were driven to and from the mill by their native owners. The women sat under trees sewing flour bags. Fat, healthy children and babies swarmed around, presenting flowery appearance. We little dreamed that in 10 years the peaceful industry of the whole district would cease and the land become a desert through our unhappy war. The unhappy war arrived at Rangiaowhia in brutal fashion on the morning of Sunday, 21 February 1864. The British troops had arrived at Te Awamutu at 7 a.m. and carried on to Rangiaowhia, 3 miles along. The village was largely abandoned except for elderly men, women and children. The cavalry went ahead and charged the village, firing carbines and causing panic and alarm amongst the residents. The troops followed soon after. Many residents fled, others took refuge in churches, while others dashed into the Aotearoa whare. It is likely that the community was in fact a church. It was, after all, the Sabbath, and there was both Catholic and Anglican churches, and the Anglican church, if you ever go there, is still standing today. Those who took refuge in the Catholic Church were fired upon. Some of the men and women of the village returned fire, killing 2 British soldiers. In the most infamous incident, several Māori, including a child, took refuge in a Aotearoa whare, which was fired upon by the troops and eventually set alight. One man staggered out unarmed with arms raised and was summarily shot dead. Several charred bodies were subsequently removed from the remains of the whare. One of the men said to have been burnt to death in the whare was Pungarehu. He was one of the local rangatira who had signed the Treaty of Waitangi at Waikato Heads on 11 April 1840. In the 1850s, he and others had sent the first sacks of flour produced by the mill at Rangiaowhia to Queen Victoria as a type of first fruits tribute. In return, Queen Victoria sent portraits of the royal family. Pungarehu was also known as Wāni Pāpita, following his conversion to Christianity, John the Baptist. In total, 2 British troops and 12 Māori villages were killed and a similar number wounded. The British military records do not identify whether the Māori dead were men, women or children, though there is considerable evidence that women and children were killed. Different theories have been offered as to why the British went out of their way to attack an undefended village. Foremost is that the British were determined to outflank Pātarangi and turn the Kingitanga troops, forcing them to abandon their fortifications and fight in the open. This was largely successful as the battle at Haireni quickly followed, where Māori no longer had the protection of those fortifications. Another theory is that capturing the Rangiaowhia district was hugely strategic because it was a significant food source for the Kingitanga forces. But for many Māori, the attack was simply a callous act of treachery by the British, targeting women, children and the elderly, who Māori had purposely placed at Rangiaowhia out of the heat of battle. In fact, some Māori maintained that they had been placed there due to an understanding with Bishop Selwyn, and General Cameron regarding the protection of non-combatants. So rather than talk to you about the work of the tribunal and pillage the work of other people who have written on the subject, I thought I might achieve a little more with a room full of Baptists if I brought to life the attack on Aotearoa, reflected on its impact on Māori and Pākehā at the time, especially in terms of Christianity, move on to then discuss aspects of the Māori faith journey and some of my observations there, and offer some observations on possible lessons for our Baptist churches today. In military terms, Aotearoa was a small but strategic victory for the British before what proved to be the decisive Battle of Aotearoa, which took place a little over a month later and brought the Waikato War to an end. These two sites lie just north of the Punu River, inside the confiscated territory, where the Crown soon after confiscated 1.2 million acres of land. But for Māori, Aotearoa had huge poignancy because of the actions of the British and Bishop Selwyn. And what I suggest is that Aotearoa was an important crossroads in not only the history and development of our nation, but also for Christianity in our country. But firstly, just a couple of caveats. I'm not an historian, theologian, or a Māori. So these are my personal views, and the intention is simply to provoke further thinking on them. But second and importantly, these events have been the subject before the Waitangi Tribunal's Te Rohe Pōtai inquiry, of which I am the presiding officer, and Aotearoa was a central focus. That inquiry concluded in February this year. We're still writing our report, so it is strictly speaking sub judice. But nevertheless, the historical sources that the tribunal relied on or were presented to the tribunal have been written about, and James Bellich in his New Zealand Wars text discusses Aotearoa. So it's relatively well known, and essentially I just want to make clear that what I say tonight are not findings or opinions on the substance of the treaty claims, and certainly do not represent the views of the tribunal. In fact, I'm not so interested in the actions of the Crown at the time. So turning to the aftermath of Aotearoa, 12 Māori were killed, which was in fact not a large number in the scheme of the Waikato War. Aotearoa resulted in the death of 150 Māori. But it was the death of non-combatants, the elderly women and children, that cut deeply for Māori. One memorable piece of evidence we heard in the tribunal concerned the use of names to commemorate tragic events at Aotearoa. A young girl, Wikitoria, no doubt named after Queen Victoria, witnessed the attack and killings and was renamed Te Mamai, the hurt, referring to the trauma of events. Te Mamai named one of her sons Te Wera, referring to the torching of the whare, and another son, Te Pupuhi, the blowing of the wind, referring to the wind that fanned the fires. Another descendant was named Maringi, referring to the spilling of tears. Excuse me. Wiremu Tamihana, the great Christian rangatira of Ngāti Haua, was involved in the Waikato Wars throughout. He was regarded as a moderate, yet he saw the events at Aotearoa as taking the war to a new pitiless level. And he's quoted soon after saying in translation, "I divided Aotearoa to be a place of abode for the women and children, and I drafted off some men to carry food to Waipa, that is to say, to Pātarangi. No sooner did the general see that we had all assembled there, then he turned round and commanded his soldiers to go to Aotearoa to fight with the women and children. I discovered this would be a very great war because it was conducted in such a pitiless manner." Thus, Māori regarded the attack as violating the rules of war. A little over a month later, the Battle of Aotearoa took place, perhaps the most well-known battle of the New Zealand Wars. In many respects, the decision by Kingitanga forces to stage a battle there was a mistake. The site was less than ideal and fortifications hastily constructed. But it was suggested in our inquiry that that decision was influenced by the grief and indignation over Rangi Aotearoa, in the sense that people would fight to the bitter end. The battle lasted 3 days with approximately 150 Māori dead. The Waikato War was brought to an end, and shortly after, the Crown confiscated the Waikato district, including the fertile Waipa Valley lands of Rangi Aotearoa. The war against Māori would, however, continue elsewhere, including right here in Tauranga, with the Battle of Pukehinihina Gate Pa in April 1864 and the Battle of Tauranga in June 1864. And I understand others will speak to that in the next day or so. Rangi Aotearoa had a significant impact on Māori attitudes towards and relationships with missionaries. So we saw, in this instance, Tupuna leaving the Anglican Church and joining the Catholic Church, who took a more neutral stance. And Māori searched for solace and meaning in the scriptures for themselves, giving birth to faiths such as Paimārire and Ringatu. Bishop Selwyn's role at Rangi Aotearoa was central to the sense of betrayal. Other missionaries, such as John Morgan and Carl Volkner, also came in for criticism, and Volkner is attributed to having forwarded a plan of Rangi Aotearoa to Governor Grey. Of course, Volkner was later killed, and Kiriopa Te Rau, who was executed for his murder, is said to have had a sister or daughter killed at Rangi Aotearoa or Haidini. And so, again, that's the sense in which this is a crossroads for relationships. I set out in the paper, which you will get, some quotes from various people at the time, but I think I probably just need to skip over some of those in the interest of time. But in 1894, George Rusden, a British historian who was generally critical of the treatment of Māori, wrote about the events at Rangi Aotearoa and posed the question in this way: "Oh, what avail was it to preach peace to the Māoris and tell them to be merciful when a British force commanded by a general and accompanied by a bishop burned women and children in a Māori house?" The other quotes that I have there are from William Grace, and he wasn't connected to the events, but missionaries faced vitriolic criticism from Māori at the time because of the link to the church. Bishop Selwyn was well aware of the attack, and writing in December 1865 to a friend, he says as follows, and I'll read this in full to give a sense of his attempt to rationalise, but also appreciating the impact. "But oh, how other things have changed, how much of the buoyancy of hope has been sobered down by experience, when instead of a nation of believers welcoming me as their father, I find here and there a few scattered sheep, the remnant of a flock which has forsaken the shepherd. At this place I do not know how far it is right to go among my people, though in former times peace or war made no difference in their willingness to receive me. At present we are the special objects of their suspicion and ill will. The part which I took in the Waikato campaign has destroyed my influence with many. You will ask then, did I not foresee this? And if so, why did I go? I answer first that though 10,000 men were sent from England, no military chaplain arrived at headquarters till the advance had reached its farthest point in Waikato. I could not neglect the wounded and dying soldiers. Then there were many Māori wounded brought in from time to whom it was my duty to minister. Add to this that two of our mission stations had been occupied by a native clergyman and catechist whom no threats could induce to leave after the English missionaries were advised to retire. It was my duty to see they were not injured when our troops advanced, and this made it necessary for me to be in the front and thereby expose myself to the imputation of having led the troops. This has thrown me back in native estimation, more I fear than my remaining years of life will enable me to recover. And he finishes in this passage, and the pleasant dream so full of bright hope has melted away, and the prospect of a few more years, if it be God's will, of plodding labour is all that remains to me to build up again the tabernacle which is fallen down. And history indeed suggests that Selwyn and others struggled to re-erect the tabernacle. It's also worth noting the consequences of rangi Aotearoa for ngā tuerua Eruiti, one of the guides. He was connected to the people of rangi Aotearoa. Belich discusses him but does not discuss what happened to him following the Waikato War. And it's in this respect that the tribunal's work still breaks new ground, because we had his great-grandson present evidence. And he explained that Ngā Tuerua's heart was broken by his involvement in rangi Aotearoa. The burden of the attack stayed with him throughout his life, and on his deathbed he was still seeking forgiveness for his involvement. Me muru I taku hara. The legacy of that burden was passed on to his descendants. So rangi Aotearoa was indeed a crossroads for all concerned. The idyllic Māori agricultural village was no more. Those Māori who were not killed were either imprisoned or driven off their land. The village and surrounding farmland became part of the Crown's massive confiscated Waikato district and was settled by British military veterans. Māori response to rangi Aotearoa appears to have hardened their attitudes to warfare, resulting in the costly final battle at Orako. Individuals who assisted the British, such as Ngā Tuerua, were stained with the responsibility for the lives lost. Of most relevance to our discussion, rangi Aotearoa severely impacted the relationship of Māori with missionaries and Pākehā Christian leadership, and the deterioration in the relationship is seen as greatly influencing Māori turning to their own meaning in the scriptures. Now, the part two is a discussion of the early Māori faith journey, and I'll skip over. How are we going with time, Dave? Essentially, you'll see in the paper when you get it that I have quite a discussion of really the criticism of missionaries. Let me read some of this. Criticism of New Zealand missionaries often focuses on their cultural and racial prejudices, their connection to the machinery of the British Empire, and their unfortunate acts of betrayal. To be sure, missionaries were flawed men and women of the time, often with poisonous attitudes and prejudices. I do not wish to diminish their faults, but I suggest that if a ledger of their achievements was to be drawn up, more often the credit ledger would add up to more than the debit ledger. Exposing the prejudiced attitudes and motives of missionaries and colonists is easy pickings. The historical record is full of incriminating material. But the issues that seem to have slipped by many mainstream commentators are: why did Māori convert to Christianity? And were there not positive experiences and outcomes of Christian faith for Māori? And so I comment that criticism of the role of missionaries has been commonplace in the tribunal setting, and sometimes deservedly so. However, it is questionable whether the analysis has always been balanced, as commentators have launched their own crusades in response to the travesties they saw in the building of empire. Māori conversion in the 19th century is often portrayed in a negative light. as Māori coming under the overpowering influence of missionaries in a Pākehā-dominated world. According to this view, Māori were passive participants, victims of the missionaries, who in turn were part of a single colonising agenda. This portrayal, in my view, is not only contradictory, ultimately conversion requires action, it also does not sit well historically. That is certainly the case during the period when there was a significant uptake of Christianity by Māori from the 1830s to the beginning of the 1850s. The primary difficulty with this view of the early Māori faith journey is that at the time, Māori were very much in control of their communities and institutions and their earthly destiny. Conversely, missionaries only had influence over Māori to the extent to which they were permitted by Māori. It seems implausible that Māori were brainwashed so quickly on such a scale by a handful of dislocated missionaries. What is missing from this analysis, in my view, is a thorough understanding of what historians call agency or Māori agency. And so the focus is often on what missionaries were doing and not what Māori were doing. So I suggest that there was significant Māori agency in their conversion, and the evidence suggests that there were four key factors. That Māori responded as a deeply spiritual people, that Māori engaged intellectually with the new theology, that there was a craving by Māori for peace, healing and reconciliation following the devastating Muscat Wars, and that all of these factors combined with a desire by Māori for material improvement in their lives. And I think in the interest of time, I set out a discussion of those four factors. I don't think I need to take you through those in detail, but so firstly is the fact that Māori were a deeply spiritual people. Secondly, intellectual engagement with the new theology, and what I set out are a couple of quotes from a text on Henry Williams, which I found fascinating, and I'll just read one from an encounter on the 3rd of February 1833. Paihia, much cast down on account of the natives at Kororareka, Tareha today in a great rage with Rawiri, he came towards him when at Kororareka, roaring like an infuriated bull in consequence of some of the answers in one of the catechisms being opposed to his views of strict propriety. Inasmuch as all men, without distinction of rank, are brought under condemnation who believe not in the name of the Son of God. This doctrine, it is observed, may do for slaves and Europeans, but not for a free and noble people like Ngāpuhi. Therefore, they will not receive it. Now, I think there's a deep theological engagement taking place there. How could rangatira and tutua, or slaves, be equal? And how could all be condemned by God and in need of Christ? This snapshot from Williams' journal shows that Māori were wrestling with the connotations of Christianity for a new order amongst Māori. This is important. In the pre-treaty setting, where the rangatiratanga of Māori prevailed, the gospel spoke first to the relationship of Māori with Māori, and not with Britannia or the missionaries who had been sent ahead of her. And I also quote from an incident, in fact, the following day, and it aligns with some evidence that I received, that I heard about quite separately, where a kaumātua in the north explained to the tribunal back in the early 1990s, he spent a day on the stand, and he started in Hawaii, and he took all day to get to Aotearoa. And his point that was, he concentrated on the significance of tapu in the world of Māori, and how tapu underpinned that world, and yet Māori did not have a rā tapu. a sacred day. And so the idea appealed to them and in a sense filled a gap in the culture. And the quote that I was going to read out is actually an incident where two unconverted Māori in 1833 are telling off a British seaman for wanting to work on the Sabbath. So even though they were unconverted, the idea of the rātapu appealed. The next major factor is peace, healing and reconciliation, which you will understand some of the history of the Musket Wars, which were devastating. And so this is the point in time when Henry Williams is doing his work, and in fact he's in today's terms, he's embedded. He's gone with the troops. So what I suggest is that Māori had a deep need for peace. And I set out an incident when I was a lawyer in the Tribunal's Uruwera inquiry, and a now prominent Tūhoe leader gave evidence which was very strident in his criticism of missionaries. And it appeared to everyone in the room that missionaries had not a single virtue in his mind. But a member of the tribunal asked him, well, was there anything good? And without hesitation, he said, peace only came through the missionaries. And I've heard that on many occasions. So the craving for peace was another significant factor, and it has been overlooked in the record. The final factor that I set out is the desire by Māori for material improvement in their lives, and that went hand in hand with what the missionaries were doing. But I'll move on because I just want to talk some of my hobby horses for you Baptists, or us Baptists. So my wife and I have been part of the Baptist Church for several years, in Rotorua for 3 years, Whangarei and for 9 years. The two cities are similar, 30 to 40% Māori, and in the Baptist churches, 1, 2, maybe 3% Māori, and I see some nodding of heads. And you go to the evangelical churches and you seem to get a bigger uptake. So what's that all about? So I note Andrew Pickard's challenge from last year's lecture, and so I wanted to just touch on some things, and this is literally preaching to the converted, and I'm sure this is stuff that you cover, but I just want to cover a few points from me. My primary comment is that if we are to better reach Māori, we must seriously acknowledge the different cultural settings Māori and Pākehā have. That is, the different cultural baggage we bring into the same room. In particular, we must understand not only the individual's walk, but also the collective's walk. Māori are a colonised people, and whether we like it or not, Pākehā represent the colonisers. I'm not advocating that we cry out we're guilty and lash ourselves with thorny branches, but to ignore the cultural context in which we attempt to walk together is to ignore 200 years of history. So I suggest that there's something to do by Pākehā in terms of learning about the circumstances of Māori and just getting into Māori environments more. And I also talk about the fallacy that Pākehā often convince ourselves of, that we're culturally neutral. And what I suggest is that surely the challenge faced by the first church as God's covenant was taken beyond God's chosen people to all cultures was just that issue of reconciling culture with faith. So we all are on that journey. We need to reflect on how we do church, and most of all, our Baptist churches shouldn't be hostile to Māori. So I recall and hear one particular incident where one of our Māori members stood to mihi to a local Pākehā woman who'd received an honour, for her work in the community, and one of the elderly members told him to speak English, which was, in my view, was disgraceful. And so why would Māori come to a church like that? I think there's a real need to champion Māori Christian leaders of the past. And I noted in the Hui booklet these books to do with children's books, and Wiremu Tamihana is right there, and I've gone and bought the 2 first volumes of those. But let me just touch on this point. The history that I've covered tonight is in the pre-colonial and colonial period, and we're now in a post-colonial period which presents new challenges for spreading the gospel amongst Māori. And so we've seen in the resurgence of Māori culture in recent years a real attempt to analyse what's taken place for a colonised people and to go through a process of decolonisation. And that process has led some Māori to not only challenge the role of missionaries, but also to question the ability to reconcile Christian faith with Māori culture. Does one have to give way to the other? This seems to be more of a challenge for the younger generations who may be less secure in their cultural identity and who fear having to forego being Māori if they are also Christian. The dilemma is not just who am I in Christ, but also what does being a Christian make me as a Māori? Now, I'm suggesting that previous generations and the older generation, like our kaumātua today, don't struggle with that dilemma. And that's certainly my experience of my wife's whānau and hapu. People of that generation are not self-conscious about cultural identity. So I touch on one of the consequences of Māori generally rebuilding cultural institutions is reaching out to past traditional atua or gods. There is also the debate over whether io or io matua kore is the same as ihua. And I'm not going to go into that debate, but I'll just share one small incident as food for thought. When I was counsel representing Tūhoe interests in the Rewera, the daily proceedings would, in accordance with custom, begin and end with karakia by someone of the Ringatu or Anglican or Presbyterian faiths. Their karakia were to Ihua, Jehovah. However, on one occasion, someone of the younger generation commenced proceedings with a non-Christian karakia. The spirit of the hui was clearly unsettled. My kaumātua client, who as I recall was first to give evidence, stood up and delivered the following rebuke and covering over the hui. Whakawātea ngā atua o nehera, o tōku atua te atua o Aotearoa o ihaka o hāpoka. I banish the gods of ancient times. My God is the God of Abraham, of Isaac, and of Jacob. So the debate around atua continues today. My point is simply that for Māori, such as my former client, who was completely secure in his culture and identity, the God he and his forebears had chosen was Ihua, and he had no difficulty in proclaiming that and challenging others. And I just want to finish on this point regarding the journey of Māori. By the late 19th century, Māori were a minority and marginalised in every sense, especially culturally. The practice of education and health treated anything Māori had to offer as primitive, worthless, and even dangerous. Māori language, culture, and history were not taught in schools, and Māori approaches to health were dismissed. In the 20th century, Māori parents who wanted their children to grow up speaking Māori had to swim against the mainstream current. As every generation passed, the struggle to maintain culture, beliefs, and language became much harder. Thousands migrated to the cities, leaving the older members of the communities to maintain marae and other institutions, and those trends continue today. My point is that Māori today who wish to fully retain their identity, culture and beliefs must work that much harder to achieve that outcome than the mainstream people. And they are seen as a radical, countercultural minority holding on to outdated beliefs and superstitions with no place in a modern world. They are always swimming against the mainstream. Māori communities continue to struggle to maintain members and invigorate the younger generation to take an interest in their institutions and beliefs. Sound familiar? If it's still not clear, I'm suggesting you just swap Christian for Māori. So my point in finishing is really that Māori and Christians have one thing in common today. We are both minorities in this country. Nō reira, aha koe tōroa tēnei kōrero, kua pau te taima, weno e mihi kau ana kia koutou, kia tātou. So I'm sorry I went longer than I was meant to, but ngā mihi kia koutou. Kia ora tātou.
So Andrew's going to come and now help us process the next step. I think we'll do that before we have dessert, Amber. So,
thank you, David. Just before we begin so the opportunity is for us to ask questions and engage, to carry the conversation on and continue further, maybe drill down on some areas that you'd like to explore or maybe ask questions in regards. But before we do that, David, I want to say a huge thank you to you. Thanks for sharing with us. Thanks for opening up some historical issues that and to shine light on contemporary issues, particularly for us as Baptists. And I think for me, I was just so struck at how grateful I am that you're engaged in the work that you do with Māori Land Court and with Waitangi Tribunal. How fantastic. We need to be praying and giving thanks for the work that you're doing. So thank you. I really, really appreciate it. So I want to open up and give an opportunity for anyone who may have questions. Feel free. Are you happy to take answers and engage? And then we're going to have some dessert.
so if you have a question, you need to stand, introduce yourself, and then ask the question, okay?
While they're thinking, maybe I can get the ball rolling. Really fascinated in the points you made about Māori agency in regards to particularly the conversion of Māori in those early years of the 30s and 50s. What role did disease and things like that play, particularly Europeans coming and creating new forms of disease and therefore also new forms of medicine? And that's been quite an argument for why Māori were drawn to Christianity as well, is the role that disease played.
You've asked a question I can't answer. In our work, what you have to understand is that the Waitangi Tribunal is really focused on what the Crown did and what the Crown did wrong. So, in the work that we've done, we haven't really looked into that side of things, so I can't really offer a comment. I guess the reason why Rangi Aotearoa appealed to me as a point to discuss with you is that in our tribunal setting, it was central to the grievance of the people, and it actually reflected a converging of Christians. There were a lot of Māori Christians who were killed there. There were a lot of Pākehā Christians who suffered the fallout of those events. So it's really the Crown conduct that's become that's the focus of our work, and probably not looking at that broader point.
Yeah, thank you.
But I guess can I just add to that what's happened in the tribunal and the court setting over years is you get a lot of people making quite simplistic arguments at times. And in fact, it's not till you hear from the kaumātua when people actually speak with true knowledge in terms of what took place. And that's what's always resonated with me, is that with that older generation, they understood what their tupuna abandoned in terms of practices. They understood the role of missionaries in that, and they weren't whakamā about that. But I think the last 30 or 40 years of journey, whakamā means embarrassed or shy or self-conscious. But I think the last 30 or 40 years of Māori really looking to rebuild culture has left a lot of Māori quite unsure, well, what do we do with this Christianity that forms so much of our lives? Because every hui that you go to in the Taitokoro Northland begins and finishes with a Christian karakia. And then people will spend the hui launching into missionaries and Christianity. And then, but they'll, you know, the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ comes out in Māori and it's all there, you know. Anyway, I'm rambling on.
Stand up, please. Can you stand up? Can you stand up, please? Yeah.
Does Rātana have any place in reclaiming older traditional beliefs? No, I can't answer that. I mean, Rātana was in the early 20th century, so he's after these events. And I think Keith Newman wrote a good book on Rātana, so his book's probably worth looking at.
Kia ora. It seems to me as if you have a fair understanding of our history and what has happened between Pākehā and Māori, and then merge that with Christianity. We are a part of the generation that you noted that are struggling with the identity thing. Somebody made a comment today at the end of Aotearoa when we were talking about the gay marriage thing. And he made note of the thing that's been burning me for a while about some treaty that you guys signed ages ago when I had no idea about it. 2000 or whatever. And so I've been to maybe 1, 2, 3 of these gatherings, and to me it seems as if nothing's happened, or maybe 1 degree turns. And I've been in another hui before where me and Jordan challenged that very thing as if there was a treaty signed and nothing's sort of happened, and their response was, we're going to do it 1 degree at a time. I guess what I'm getting at is that how do things change? Is it the 1 degree at a time? Is it this signing of a treaty and they're not actually responding to the very thing that you wrote or anything like that? And as the new generation coming up, I don't want the 1 degree change. I would see it as a waste of time and a waste of money, a waste of offerings, a waste of koha. And for someone like you, I want to know, or I want to learn something off you from all of your understanding, because you noted on a few things real lightly. Do you have any advice for us? Do Māori need to go into the top leadership? Do Māori need to influence it, or can we just write a paper and then give it to the guys who sit in a room somewhere and make the real decisions? Do you have, without being wise, and I know you're a very wise person, I'm listening to you, as a koha from whatever you have learned, do you have a koha to offer back to me as an upcoming leader for our people and our new generation?
That's a very big question. And I've got to stay out of politics because I'm a judge, and my role is just to offer a view on what happened in terms of events. Can I come back to I guess my paper, and you'll have time to read it, and Dave will be able to flick it out in the morning. I guess the kaupapa for me is that in terms of the Christian walk for Māori, I think it's become a harder walk in a generation today where there's, at the same time, there's this passion and work and rebuilding culture, okay? And there's a lot of talk that comes out that basically suggests that Christianity is not compatible with being Māori. And for me, I think that debate is pointless. And what I am really saying is look back to those in the past and understand what took place. So the idea that Māori came under the terrible influence of missionaries, as people before me say, really just doesn't fit. And it doesn't fit with those tupuna because their rangatiratanga was intact. You know, this is pre-treaty. The British are visiting, the French are visiting, the Americans are visiting, you know, all sorts. But missionaries are not in a position of any real power. And I think the problem with that whole argument is it actually diminishes Māori, because it sort of says you're just these passive, well, they were pushovers. But I think what I've attempted to explore in the paper is that there were these significant drivers for Māori in terms of taking up a new faith. And there was and the fact is there was an abandonment of some old practices. And people don't want to even acknowledge that. So I think the history should build up young Māori like you today. Read books like Evelyn Stokes' biography of Wiremu Tamihana. There are other books. There are those children's books, but I think a lot of that needs to really be exposed just to build you up. As to the 1 degree shift, it takes a lot of effort and time to turn around a waka that's the size of our big waka. That's all I can really say. Kia ora.
As a result of last year, last year, we had at one very small church, 4 of us enrolled in Aotearoa, learning today. So we have us in the 17th year, and 3 of us and other members of our church as well. So this is as a direct result of what we did. We are learning how to speak our language for the first time. So it's not just it's tangible, it's spiritual.
Can I just say, yeah, it is small changes. I mean, even in our church in Whangarei, just the fact that people will stand up the front and greet you as kia ora. 10 years ago, 15 years ago, you wouldn't have heard that. It's very small. It's not enough, but you do get a sense of a desire to change. I think a lot of people just don't know how to do that to involve Māori.
In your mahi, you would be hearing constantly from different iwi their story, their history, and hearing their roots. Swing over to where we sit in our Baptist churches, and hearing the constant stories and possibly some familiar themes continually coming through. As Baptist churches, how do we, what are some things that practical things that you can see that we can do that builds connections to the people, to build relationships? For instance, we have these visits going, like tomorrow, going to Gate Park, into the stories there. So some other thoughts that you might have had that you're seeing, she talked about the 1% in our churches. So what are some practical advice and thoughts that you have for us as different churches in different regions with different makeups or our demographics. Some general themes that come through, and how can we be relative in relation to those people that you are constantly seeing.
Oh, kia ora. I'm not sure that I have a useful answer. I actually think that you're the people that need to debate that. You've got the pastoral call on your lives, and at Whangarei Central Baptist, we're a long way from getting it right. So I haven't seen any clear examples. Maybe it's a matter of looking at your neighbours and seeing what they're doing. Look, I don't know, but I think at a leadership level it's really important that you have these occasions at your hui. If there's going to be a genuine outreach to Māori. Yeah, I'm sorry.
This is my opinion about our churches, our Baptist churches is...
You want to stand up here?
I just think for the churches that are here, I think understanding Māori people is integral. So understanding the history is a good beginning point, because you get to know what's happened before. You'll get to know, say if you had a Māori coming to your church, you'll understand how they're feeling. You'll be more sensitive to where they are, their culture, understanding the Māori culture. Do a bit of research. Read about the history of your rōpū, your area, where your church is, and just having that sensitivity to Māori people when they come to your churches and visit. Or if you are in the area, get to know the Māori community. Find ways to reach out and just build relationship, communication, to bless people who are in your community. But knowledge is the thing, is understanding the history in the past so you can bring forth the future. And because there's a lot of mamai that gets carried on through the generations. So I think that's a good starting point, is wherever you can, learn as much as you can about your area, about the history, about Māori culture, those sorts of things. Then you can start at a good point. But that's a good beginning point, I think. And in your churches, bring Māori forms of worship, those sorts of things into your normal church proceedings every Sunday. Have some Māori waiata in your churches. If there's a Māori in your church, bring them forward and encourage them to bring out those Māori forms of worship and being a Christian, how Māori see it. So awhi those people already in your churches and just pray for them and ask them to be raised up as leaders to lead the next generations. So that's my opinion.
Can I just add to that? It obviously requires intentional action from leadership in the churches for this to happen. And I guess it's really about normalising your culture of your church so that it's inclusive of Māori. And the thing I've always loved is that the term Māori actually means normal or ordinary or regular. So wai Māori is fresh water. And in our tribunal hearings, we had this Christian kaumātua stand up, and he gave a kōrero that didn't really make sense at the time, but it appealed to him because the scripture in the Bible where Jesus walks on the water, the missionaries were searching for were searching with Māori as to, well, how do we express that? And if you look in the Bible, it says, I haere Māori ai a ihu kreiti I runga I te moana, which literally is, he walked as a Māori, or walked Māori on the water. And this was his gem that he gave to us. And I keep on going back to that scripture, and I think there's something there. And for me, it's really about the term Māori is about being normal, and it's about normalising Māori in your church. There was a man over here.
We'll make this the last one. We're just aware of time.
Dave, you go because you didn't get
Dave, yeah.
Kia ora, Dave. My name's Dave.
Good.
I have a question, a little bit unsure how to frame it, but over the years, what I've noticed that's happened in New Zealand, because I've kind of been engaging with some of this stuff, is a lot of our institutions have reversed some of the statistics that are around, because my background's in education, but as Kurikaupa has developed, as Kongareo's developed, you're seeing Māori engaging with Māori because Māori are doing things Māori way. The same with the health system, the same with our local marae in Mandarewa. But it seems to be that in the church where the concept of tēnā rangatiratanga, I'm not sure, I haven't seen it and I don't know where it fits. But it seems to be when that's outworked, when there's a space for that to happen, life seems to flourish. So how do we as a church engage with that concept?
Well, again, I'm going to dodge the question because I don't really have the answers except to get your numbers of Māori up. See, if you have more Māori in your church, it's going to change. And the thing that has always struck me is that your life is enriched. It is enriched. I grew up in the Hokianga Pākehā family, but a funny mixed up Pākehā family, because my grandfather, I come from the grandfather and first wife with a Pākehā side. His second wife was Māori. His only son that had a child, apart from my father, who married a Māori, so all my cousins were Māori. Okay, so quite odd, Pākehā family with Māori cousins. We had lessons in Māori, but didn't learn so much. Went to university, and for me there was a transformation. And met Aotearoa's sister, that's my brother-in-law down there. And our whole world opened up. And I just think that for our Baptist churches, we're missing out on an amazing transformation as a community because we don't, because our Māori membership is so low. So I don't have any answers, but I just think it's a blessing for us to have Māori within our church. Ka nui tēnā?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Once again, Dave, thank you very much. I think Dave Moko has just gone to get Ray to see if Ray will pray. I was going to get Rewa to do it, but Dave said, we'll get Ray to pray for us. I'm aware of time. Again, David, I want to say a huge thank you on behalf of Baptist Research. And actually, in this, I want to say a huge thank you to Dave Moko. I had never heard of Judge David Ambler being part of Whangarei Baptist, leading the search committee process, and I had no idea at all, and it was Dave Moko's doing actually that we had a chat together and he came up with the idea. So, and I'm absolutely wrapped with it. It's huge for us. So thank you, David. Thank you very much for journeying with Baptist Research on this, and David, thank you very much for being with us and opening things up.